Hey all, Pedantic Skeptic here, and I figured today I would respond to a YouTube channel called Focus on the Family. It is a Christian channel. It is a global Christian ministry dedicated to helping families thrive. We provide help and resources for couples to build healthy marriages that reflect God's design and for parents to raise their children according to morals and values grounded in biblical principles. Today, this where is it? Today I'm responding to Don't Give Up Raising a Child with Autism, Julie Hornock. And this is going to be a multi-part series, probably 2 or 3 parts. I'm not entirely sure yet, but the video is quite interesting, and we're going to take a look at this. Let's watch this instead.
If you have a child with any diagnosis, any special needs diagnosis, any mental health issues, autism, you have been chosen by God for a different life. You know, it's not that this thing happened to you, it's that He chose you.
The question is why? Why on earth? I mean, you're making this about the parents instead of the children, which is a problem in itself. But what I'm curious about is why you would credit your God for arguably giving somebody a harder time raising a child, which is hard enough as it is. Because one of the things you're going to find out, especially if you have a child with autism, is that your way of bonding with that child and that child's way of bonding with you are going to be so fundamentally different. And, you know, people around me don't always know necessarily whether or not I've bonded with them. And my parents were no exception.
To live a non-traditional life.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
I doubt it.
John, for parents of any child who has special needs, life can be a difficult and heartbreaking journey at times. Because no matter what qualities or talents your child may possess, they will always be viewed by the world as different.
This is true, but I still want to know why this is so parent-centric. You're almost taking away the individuality of the individual who has, autism, because you want to focus on how it affects the parents, which shows your bias. It shows your inability to see beyond anything. And honestly, I think it's kind of disingenuous and shitty.
Right? They're not like most others, and oftentimes as less than normal. Another factor is how the diagnosis impacts you as a parent.
Again, it shouldn't be about the parents. And I'm not saying we need to ignore the parents, but I think first and foremost, we need to be focused on the kid.
The grief you'll experience over the loss of dreams for your child and family. And John, we've mentioned before on this program how you and your wife Dina have gone through such challenges with your son Zane.
Yeah, he was adopted at 9 months, diagnosed at 2 years with autism and some other challenges as well physiologically. And we have gone through everything you just talked about, the shifting sands of expectations and what is normal and how are we going to deal with this. And there's a lot there, and it's been quite an incredible journey.
I think one of the problems is that we live in a world ruled by normies. And what I mean by that is we have people who don't teach their kids from a young age that you're going to run into classmates who are different from you. And, you have to just think about where the other person is coming from and realize that, some people may be a little bit different, but they're not any less. And, parents don't teach that to their kids, especially if their kids are autistic.
Well, because of that, you're going to jump in probably a lot more today to give your perspective and Dina's. But let me clarify some things for our listeners and viewers on YouTube. Autism is still very much misunderstood in our culture today.
I think part of that is because it's a bunch of holistic people studying something that's not fundamentally within their capacity to even relate to. That's honestly what I think the problem is. I think if we got enough autistic people studying autism, we would have a very clear picture in about a week, honestly.
1 in every 44 children are diagnosed with autism. That is
I thought it was like 1 in every 168. I don't think it's as high as 1 in 44. Because that's almost 3% of the population. I think it's closer to 1% of the population, but I could be wrong.
is a huge number. And there's a wide spectrum that children are diagnosed with, high functioning to.
Red flag, red flag. Wait, when was this aired? How long ago? Okay. A 6-month-old broadcast. This is 6 months ago. They should not be using functioning labels. Functioning labels are no longer the accepted standard. It's actually now about support needs. And the reason why is because functioning puts the onus on the individual to and measures their degree of conformity to expectations set forth by our neurotypical world. Whereas support needs has more to do with what this person needs in order to be successful, what this person requires as inputs in order to have a somewhat normal output. And the reason why the support needs model is so much better is because it factors in stochasticity that the functioning model can't. So, under the functioning model, you kind of assess the person on one given day for a short period of time, whereas under the support needs framework, you're really tuning into that person under different circumstances throughout, different times to kind of figure out what their support needs might be. And generally speaking, people's support needs change. So, for example, I may not need very much assistance keeping my shit together, the first couple days of the week, but as the week draws to a close, maybe I'm worn out. And so I need somebody like my roommate to help me just remember to get something done. So the support needs framework is a much better framework here. So yeah.
Very impacted with autism. Finally, we in the Christian community should be the first to understand and embrace these families that are dealing with autism and other special.
But you're not. Now, look, I have no problem if a Christian organization wants to offer help, as long as they're doing it without the intention of turning everybody Christian. I personally don't think that religion is particularly helpful for individuals who are autistic, but that's my opinion. I think that if the goal is really to make life better for autistic people and their families, we need to divorce ourselves from this model of, well, we're doing it because we believe X, and they're doing it because they believe Y. I don't think that that's I don't think it's helpful or really even healthy to be focusing on your motivations for helping people as though it's an extension of your religious beliefs.
It's too. Matthew 25 makes it clear when we serve and care for the least of these in our society.
Seriously? Are you seriously saying that people who are autistic are the lowest in society? Maybe they're the most vulnerable in some respects, but I would definitely not say that they are any lesser than anybody else. I think you really need to rethink some of the ways you're talking.
It's the same as serving and caring for Jesus Christ. Let that sink in for a minute. So that's why this topic is so important for us today.
Yeah, and we're so honored to have Julie Hornock here in the studio with us. She's an author, a speaker, blogger, and co-founder of Labeled and Loved Life.
Do I want to know? Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, this lady has dogs, cows, chickens, and other pets. Nice. Hmm. Well, I did some of that when I was a kid. I mean, not too badly, just a couple of times when I was really young. Okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. So I'm kind of torn because obviously when your kid is very, very young, and by very, very young I mean like 2 and 3, very young, you obviously have to be the one behind the wheel, if you know what I mean. The one that's taking charge and being the grown up. My concern obviously gets into just when your child gets older, and I'm talking like late elementary school into middle school, you want to be careful not to see your role as you know, being the one who's the arbiter of, your child's experiences. Your child is their own person. And my concern with some of these folks who want to give every autism mom, an award or a medal for, their bravery or whatever, is it's a very, it almost makes it seem like the parent is burdened. And, it gets rid of the aspect of, these are two people who are their own people who have to interact with each other and, pave a course through their lives. Rather than, like, oh my gosh, poor lady, birthed somebody with a, defect, and now we have to make sure that she's okay. Some of these advocacy groups do tend to get very, very much like that, unfortunately, where, they want to make the parents of autistic children out to be, these great saints, and um, almost though that wasn't their job in the first place. And the reason that's problematic is because you have a person who, in almost hopefully all cases, willingly chose to have a child, assuming the risk that maybe this child would be born differently. And now they have this, consequence of their actions to deal with. And we really need to put more of an emphasis on holding that person accountable than rewarding them for all their silly little victories.
Lifelines for special needs. And today we're going to hear a lot of personal stories, and some of those are captured in a book that Julie has pulled together, United in Autism, Finding Strength Inside the Spectrum. This is a collection of stories about families, and I think it's a really great resource for every parent to kind of view their child and this community through. Get your copy by clicking the link on the screen or call 800, the letter A, and the word family.
Julie, welcome to Focus on the Family.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
It's good to have you. Describe for us what Lizzie, your daughter, was like before her diagnosis. What was going on? Did anything catch your attention?
Well, it's almost hard to tell because I had an older child who was a very busy child. And so she was typically developing all the way up until about 9 months. And if I look back in her baby book, I can see some things that kind of raised a red flag. Just that maybe she would flip through books just for hours on end without really looking at the pages, just sit there. And she just didn't require a lot from me. And that was very, very different than my older child.
That's really important, especially for moms who have young children, to be able to diagnose. And it's not always going to turn out to be autism, but to be aware. It's so important to be aware.
There are things, I think we need to step away from the missing milestones model of figuring out if somebody's autistic, because while that is oftentimes a sign that somebody may be autistic, I would say it's more of misplaced or mismatched milestones. So there might be some milestones that occur in a different order than you would expect. Maybe your child becomes hyper literate at a very early age, like I did. Like I was reading at, an 8th grade level when I was like in 1st grade. I really took off in certain areas, and then in other areas I was really stunted for quite a while. And, you can have kids where they don't start speaking until they're, well over 3 or 4 years old. And some kids who, have other things going on. And one of the things that you want to be careful of when it comes to just looking at missing milestones when you're trying to figure out if somebody's autistic is, are they, malabsorbing their food, or are they malnourished, which is why they're missing milestones? Do they have some sort of infection? Do they have a tumor? And I'm not saying that these are more likely than autism, but I think that there does need to be an awareness that there could be something else going on. For any any health problem you're having, you definitely need a differential diagnosis. You definitely need to rule out a whole bunch of other things that it could be, because, you know, it's one thing if your child's autistic, but it's another thing if they have, a curable brain tumor that's, pressing on something important, which is why they're not speaking. And so this deficits are not always the best, most reliable indicator of any one thing, especially autism.
So as that young mom, and even your husband Greg, were there conversations about that? Doesn't seem exactly right.
Well, no, there weren't conversations about it because it wasn't so obvious. And we really didn't start to seek help until things became pretty obvious, because we just thought we were in a family of like extroverts, just lots and lots of extroverts. And I thought, oh, this little girl doesn't need as much attention. She likes to be by herself. Maybe that's what an introvert is. I didn't.
At that age, I don't think that those particular traits are that well developed to the point where you can determine if somebody's an extrovert or an introvert. I'm sorry, I just don't. But what I will say is that, autistic people are perfectly capable of desiring social interactions with other people. They just don't necessarily know how to go about it. And so then they can become very isolated, and that's not healthy.
No.
And you mentioned that 9-month mark. Is that when it was more obvious, or how old was she when you did say we need to probably talk to somebody?
Yeah, she around 9 months. She kind of stopped noticing the world, and so before then she had been developing just typically, sitting up, crawling, and she used to do this cute little thing with her brother where she would crawl and crawl and crawl, and then she'd stop and look back and like let him catch her.
Right.
And then one day it just kind of stopped. She just stopped looking up, and so she would crawl really, really, really fast, and then she'd slam into the wall, and we just thought, isn't that so funny? As a parent, we didn't really put it together that it was something more, that she was truly not looking up in the world, and that was a sign that she wasn't observing.
She's observing the world in a different way. It doesn't mean she's not observing the world. She just has a different way of perceiving it.
What was going on. And then from there, it was about a year's process of where we just saw her kind of spiraling down. So she, after that, started waking up from her naps, just clenching her fists and sweating and crying. And then she started to bang her head on the ground, flapping of the arms. She began to walk on her tiptoes. She started lining up all of her food, and then began lining up her toys as well. And then I think the thing that was just the hardest and forced us to get some help was that she truly...
Just checking my notifications. Let's do this.
Hey guys, welcome to the Council of Trent podcast. I'm your host, Catholic Answers apologist and speaker, Trent Horn. And today
Okay.
just wouldn't answer to us. Like she went inside herself, almost like where her eyes glazed over. So she could be standing right by me, and I had no connection to her. I would be screaming her name, and she wouldn't ask.
That had to be so difficult for you and Greg. I mean, trying to manage this. There's not.
What about how the child is doing? Jesus Christ.
At that point, you haven't really seen the doctor. There's not a lot of support around you. All these fears are bubbling up.
Yeah.
I mean, take us to that emotion and what...
Well, and I think to understand that, I mean, we were 28 years old, and we had really truly been following just this classic traditional lifestyle that I think you are almost taught to seek. And so we had gotten married, we had successful jobs, we had our first child. I was able to stay home with him because my husband was doing well enough for me to stay home. And we had just built our dream home because my father is a builder, and I was able to design and then build that home. And
ooh, I'd like her to build me a home. I'm just kidding. But now I'm just thinking, like, when I have my own place, I want to have like a big sunroom for all my plants. And anyway.
And so really we had a great supportive family, a great supportive church. And I felt like we were kind of in that bubble of running towards happiness and running towards comfort.
And then the autism came, right? Am I right? Am I on the right track here? This, it kind of pisses me off because having somebody in your family with autism isn't going to totally derail your life. This is another human being. This is not, something where we are talking about like, oh my God, like our house burned down and now we have to find a new place to live. This is a human being that is part of your family. Now, I will say, yes, anytime anybody in your family has any kind of health condition, there are ramifications for the other people in the family. But when it comes to something like, neurodiversity, the accommodations that are required need to be there because this person has a totally different wiring to the brain. And in order for people to get along when they have different ways of thinking, there needs to be a mutual understanding of one another rather than just this model of, well, this person has a condition we need to treat. No, this person has a way of being that you need to find ways to be compatible with in order to have a healthy relationship with them.
And I think often, we set that as a sight, like if we're doing all those things, then we're going to have a great life. And we kind of thought we were on top of it all. We're like, we got this beautiful family. We got a boy, we got a girl. So then when things started happening and going downhill with Lizzie, it felt so out of control, and just like I was taken back and didn't know what to do. And I had never met anything that I hadn't been able to fix or anything I hadn't been able to work.
It's not something that has to be fixed, okay?
Hard enough to, if something didn't work as I was working for it, I would just stop, regroup, and work harder. And it just didn't work like that for autism.
Let's spend a moment there with that
Okay.
fixer mentality.
Yeah.
It's completely reasonable. I think every reasonable person, every reasonable parent would have fallen into that mode. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
That depends on exactly what you're trying to fix. If you're trying to make your child a conformist, if they're otherwise healthy, I don't think we should be looking at autism as a disease or, a mental health condition per se, like these people happen to be. And, it does irritate me because these are, this is a 6-month-old video. Now, if this was a video from like 2005, I would feel a little bit differently because, there was definitely less awareness. But, I think they need to, talk to actual autistic people about their experiences growing up and relating to their family members and things like that. And, rather than just a couple of holistic people chatting about how they're inconvenienced by somebody in their family being a little different than them, focus on how, somebody who isn't in their shoes might feel having to deal with this type of rhetoric. This isn't solving any problem.
But how did you manage trying to overfix, if I could put it that way?
Well, I didn't do well at it at all. Yeah, I mean, I'm a fixer by nature, and I really, we jumped in very strong with 30 hours a week of therapy, running it out of my house, therapists coming in and out. We had behavioral therapy. We had
30 hours.
30 hours a week.
That's a full-time job, practically.
It is it is a full-time job. And doing all those therapies, that was my complete focus. And I think the problem with being a fixer, like I am, is that assumes that I know what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And, lots of times the things that I think are wrong, which in my mind, autism was wrong, and I was trying to fix it and go back to that traditional life.
This is why we can't have nice things. This is why autistic people hate themselves and have higher suicide rates and things like that, because of this sort of shit.
Lifestyle. And that just wasn't God's plan for us. And what I thought was wrong was actually what God was going to use.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot in families.
Yeah, John, you can resonate
Well,
with
I'm
this.
tracking because at about 2 years, we had enough concern working through some of the attachment issues through the adoption, and just the head banging, the screaming, the lack of communication, the sensory pushback in every sort of way. Yeah. We had a diagnosis from a neurological specialist in pediatrician work.
I have a question. Has anyone seen the way autistic toddlers behave? Now, I'm not saying this child isn't autistic. What I'm saying is some of these behaviors he's listing off, I see almost every toddler on the planet exhibit, screaming and headbanging and shit like that. Toddlers are the worst. They are just a nightmare to be around. I don't think it's unique to autistic toddlers. Jesus Christ.
And he basically said, he's got autism, I'll see you in a year. And that didn't sit so well with us, because for us, the heart was, well, we're benchmarking against 5 other kids. He's struggling. What is it? What's the puzzle to unlock the
Of course, it's the puzzle model.
mystery
Well,
within?
and what Julie was saying, I was thinking of Dina, because you also had 30 hours.
She was a strong mama bear, and we had 3 therapists every day coming in the house. We had
Do you people not think that that is, overwhelming for a child who has sensory issues? I mean, just think. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who has a need for consistency and calm, okay? One of the things that, autistic people generally have a hard time with is getting overstimulated. And I know there's a thing about, well, if there's a particular routine, it's good. But if there's a routine overstimulation happening, then that particular routine gets really, really harmful and toxic.
occupational speech, all sorts of therapies, and homeschooling 5 other kids. It was a chaotic time, and it wasn't. We weren't overwhelmed to the point of sadness. We were just sad for him, because obviously there was a struggle within that we couldn't figure out.
It's not necessarily a struggle within, it's a struggle between 2 different modes of operating. I always think of it as different operating systems for a computer. You have the autism and you have the, ableism, and they work in fundamentally different ways, where things that are intuitive to one aren't intuitive to the other. And I think that, there's enough of a human commonality between the 2 where communication can occur, but I think that some of the shit every time there's a miscommunication between 2 people who have different neurotypes, it being the fault of the neurodivergent person needs to stop.
Sure, and that's part of what takes place. Let me ask you, Julie, the good days and the bad days. So you get the diagnosis, kind of like where John and Dina were at, the doctor says, okay, this is what we think your child is struggling with. Yeah. And then come back in a year. I mean, that was your situation, but what were the good days like and what were the bad days like?
Well, the good days, I had to go through a lot to get to the good days, because my focus was so intense and so strong. And the good days were the days where I could slow down and just appreciate her for who she was, where she was. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't do that enough. We're busy trying to get to this end goal. I can't wait till she speaks. I can't wait until, she can go to school. I can't wait till she can play with a friend at recess. We always have these goals because we're trying to go back to these traditional benchmarks.
Right.
And the good days are whenever we can stop, take a breath, and just be like, look at her. She's funny. Or look at her. She just did something so adorable. Look at her. She looks beautiful in that dress. They're just slow down and be like, I just adore my child exactly how she is.
Well, at the mid-break here, tell people how they can get united in autism.
Yeah, we'd love for you to get a copy of this book. It's 30 different stories, I think, of families with autism.
Do you really think you're going to capture autism with just 30 people?
They're dealing with and experiencing it and celebrating. Mm-hmm. United in Autism is available at our website. Click the link on your
Oh, I don't know why Temple Grandin decided to contribute to this flaming pile of garbage, but I think part of it. I'm at this institution where Temple Grandin is. I emailed her wanting to just have a conversation about this sort of topic with her, and she never got back to me. I'm a little salty about that, but maybe she's busy. She has her own stuff going on.
Screen or give us a call. 800, the letter A, and the word family.
Julie, I was intrigued by something you said, and this is it, that you cannot actually grieve until you realize autism is forever.
Honestly, this is a really poor model because I feel like parents shouldn't expect so much of their child to where there is like a devastation should that child be hang on a sec. Expecting a child to be neurotypical, um that's a lot of pressure, especially when it's something that somebody doesn't have control over.
Now, before people jump on that, as a Christian, you can pray. You can ask God to heal your daughter. We get that. We understand that.
Yeah.
But differentiate that realization that that's true. I'm sure you and your husband prayed.
This guy, this dude talking, looks like a combination of like the two main members of the band The Offspring merged together and aged another 20 years.
That God would intervene.
Of course,
Right.
yeah.
But then move to that idea of
Okay, does that look a lot like this guy here? Not this. Whoops. I mean, that looks like the other guy. Okay, back to focusing.
grieving. Autism is something you deal with for a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In my head, we were veering off course, and it was going to be 2 years. And so I had in my head, she was diagnosed at 2, and I don't know what was in there. We're just going to go strong. We're going to go hard for 2 years.
You can fix this.
And we will fix this, and she'll be back to typical by 4. And so when 4 came around, she was really not even communicating with us at all. She had some language.
Well, I got fired up. Definitely something that irritates me to no end. Some of the rampant ableism and just some of the approaches that these people have. So I hope to see everyone in the next one.